Well, we're very fortunate today to be focusing on North Carolina. As you may know, those of us who are regulars at BigTent, we've been focusing on different states where they're swing states and they have a lot of impact and a lot of important things going on. We all do, but some states seem to be more at issue than others. So we're so delighted to have a representative of North Carolina here today. Kate Fellman is our guest today, and she is with this amazing organization. I'm going to read you a little of her bio. Just a second here. Okay. Kate Fellman is the founder and executive director of You Can Vote. She worked in organizational effectiveness department of General Mills, and she did social science and at the University of Minnesota. No, did I get that? It's in St. Paul, Minnesota. Metropolitan State University, that's what it was, sorry, Kate. And she began her political career as an intern in the late Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone's final campaign. And she was just telling us about his favorite song that was playing earlier, which was really nice. She began organizing volunteers, and I'm not going to go too much into her bio because she has a great story and I'm going to let her tell it herself, but it's really inspiring. And I'm looking forward to her telling you all about it. So she has many interesting topics here that I'm not even going to get into because I'm going to leave that for her. But thank you so much for being here, Kate. It's really a pleasure, and BigTent welcomes you.
Well, I'm so excited to be here with activated ladies, favorite kind of audience. So yeah, I'm Kate Feldman. I'm originally from Minnesota. I've lived in North Carolina for 18 years. And when I moved here, I didn't know about the politics of this state. But it is it is a swing state, despite what anybody says. And then in 2008, in January, I started registering voters in North Carolina in preparation for the primary between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama coming to North Carolina. And I registered my first voter in front of a Walmart, and I didn't know what I was talking about. And I felt very unprepared to have the kind of conversation I needed to have that would be impactful with a voter. But then I got more involved. I became a neighborhood team leader. North Carolina, specifically Durham, where I live, decided the primary election in 2008 and the general election. The state was carried by 10,000 votes, which was a very, very, very slim margin. And so I was very proud of the work that we did, specifically in my hometown of Durham here, around organizing for elections. And then I got even more involved in a local community organization, nonprofit, that also had a political action committee. And we did a lot of work at city council, county commissioners, local school board elections. And so then I got to really get a PhD in Durham and North Carolina politics by working deeply in local elections here. Well, then in 2013, you may have heard of a little case called Shelby versus Holder, when the Supreme Court rolled back key provisions in the Voting Rights Act, and 40 North Carolina counties were covered in pre-clearance, meaning if they changed their election laws, the Department of Justice needed to review it and part of the Voting Rights Act. Unfortunately, the voting rights, that part, pre-clearance, got overturned. And the very next day, lawmakers in North Carolina introduced a full, huge, monster voter suppression bill that eliminated all of the ways that young people and people of color turned out in historic numbers in 2008. And subsequently, in 2016, it got ruled by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional for targeting African American voters with surgical precision. However, in 2013, we didn't know that would get declared as unconstitutional. What we did know is that next year, in 2014, people were going to think that they needed photo ID, and it wasn't going to go into effect until 2016. And they took away same-day registration at early voting, re-registration, out-of-precinct voting, all of these things that voters in North Carolina had become very used to. And I just knew right then and there, like, I got to work on voting rights, because the people that I care about, I've helped educate about elections, now will not have the right information. And you need to bring that information directly to the voters who are impacted. And so I got together some volunteers and some other folks that have been working in voting in this area, and we came up with a positive campaign, You Can Vote, to help our neighbors become registered and educated voters, regardless of these changing election rules. And we were so fortunate because the election rules have changed so many times since the Voting Rights Act was cut, because we don't have those protections of pre-clearance. So I'm gonna just walk you through a little bit about You Can Vote and what we've done over these past 8 years. It's been a wild ride. And we've had so much fun doing it, and we're making such an impact in the state of North Carolina. These are some of our fellows in Wilmington, our students. So we were established in 2013, but we had our first training in 2014 at a church in Durham. Over 200 people came, and they were ready to go and ready to register voters. And that's where we introduced our first voter education piece, our material, the fridge card, which is used and requested and in demand all across the state every year now. And oh, here's my contact information. If anybody wants it, you can follow us on social. And you can email me at any time with any questions. So part of the reason why I started You Can Vote is because I have this deep belief in what Paul Wellstone taught me, is that politics is what we do, it's what we create, it's what we work for, and what we hope to build and dare to imagine. And the politics of North Carolina when I moved here, what is not this. Durham, North Carolina, though, was very getting close to this in the work that I had done locally in organizing. So I really wanted to take a positive message of hope and the ability to vote our way out of some of the problems that we are facing here in terms of voter suppression. And North Carolina, our vision for North Carolina is a representative democracy that reflects the diversity of our state and includes all voices and aims to serve all North Carolinians. So that is our vision. And our mission is to educate, register, and empower voters. So we're an organized, effective, nonpartisan campaign to increase voter registration and turnout for people facing barriers to full civic participation. So we know that voter suppression, it impacts young people, it impacts people of color, it impacts criminal justice involved individuals, it impacts seniors, people with disabilities, students. It's omnipresent in the state. So we are a campaign without a candidate. I didn't want to have our campaign have to go away, close the doors, and the volunteers didn't have anything to do for another 2 years or another 4 years when somebody decided to spend money turning out voters here. I wanted something that didn't go away, that we could keep building off of year after year. We do not mobilize around specific issues like the environment or education, because we promise voters and our partners that we're never going to tell anybody how to vote. And as soon as you start putting buttons on for other issues or causes, that leads to less trust. And so we want to be trusted. We're not advocating for anything, just your right as an individual to cast your ballot. So in the field, when we're out at our partner sites, in schools, we're just preparing people with just the critical foundational information that they need to know to make sure that their ballots count and they get to the polls. So what elections are up? Most people don't know that there's a primary election coming up, or primaries coming up, midterms coming up. They think, is it president again? No, we have to educate people on what is actually coming up on the ballot. Folks don't know why you should vote. There's a lot of folks that say voting has nothing to do with me. We are answering that for them. Who is eligible to vote? The eligibility keeps changing. Like I said, it's changed several times over the last 8 years, including a new additional 56,000 eligible voters this year who are on post-release supervision on probation or parole. They are eligible to vote this year, but we have to educate them about that. People don't know when you vote. They don't know where you vote. And we tell them that, and we make sure they're knowing how to vote year after year, and resources and tools and trusted nonpartisan links that they can rely on for the facts. And we're really big on data, and we use data to improve our outcomes on everything we do. So we're turning out voters, especially those least likely to vote, and the voters that we register and educate, they outperform the state by upwards of 10 points in participation. because of the education and the quality of our services. And like I said, we don't go away after an election. We're continuing to build our volunteers. So many partnerships and volunteers. When campaigns leave, you have to rebuild all of that. We are continuing to grow and deepen our partnerships and build trust and figure out better ways to educate and reach voters by sticking around and doing year-round organizing. So like I said, we launched in 2014. It was all volunteer that year. We registered a couple thousand voters and we turned them out to vote. And we were so surprised at their increased turnout over the state average of voter turnout. So in 2016, we actually we made an organization. We had a couple paid staff, including myself, and we managed to, our 800 volunteers registered almost 13,000 voters that year in the counties right around Durham. And 80% of those registrants turned out to vote versus 69% of North Carolinians turning out to vote in 2016. So 80% of 13,000 is roughly 10,000 votes. And our governor's race was decided by 10,000 votes in 2016. So I was so proud of the work that we did. And we started getting into high schools beyond the high schools and the colleges that we were working on in Durham and adding other large counties to our service region. In 2017, after the 2016 election, my phone was ringing off the hook. People wanted us in Charlotte. They wanted us in Wilmington. They wanted us here. They wanted us there. And so you build it, I will come in and train your people. And so volunteers brought You Can Vote to Charlotte. Second, well, tied with Wake County and Raleigh is the largest county in North Carolina. And now we have a great office in Charlotte thanks to their work. In 2018, we grew out east. Eastern North Carolina is a very tough turf, but we had our first training in Wilmington in early 2018. And a very confusing ballot that year. So I was so glad that we were able to be there to help folks understand these constitutional amendments on their ballot and all of these tricks that the legislature pulled at the last minute when it comes to voting rights. So now we bridged from west all the way to east in 2018. And then in 2020, my goal was to expand from the 11 counties service range that we were into 20 counties in 2020. That was a great slogan and saying. And then 2020 just blew up in our face, but with the pandemic. So we pivoted, we figured out new ways. We went in person to online in about a day and a half and started doing census turnout. And we created a campaign called Voting Rights Ambassadors. So VRA, our own VRA. Where we paid local organizers across 53 early voting sites to staff those sites and provide information to voters, and then celebrate each voter by taking selfies, sharing pictures, telling people to get down here, their same day registration, using an opportunity to send information back into the community from those who have voted. And also voter protection. There were several threats to voters, intimidation, and we're expecting the same thing again this year. But so having a presence at these historically targeted and marginalized communities to ensure that their votes get counted, that anything that's not right gets reported to the voter hotline, and that we leverage those voters to turn out their communities. So that's what we innovated in 2020. And North Carolina had historic turnout, 75%. 2016, it was 69%. So our work is working. People are voting, and we just keep getting better. So this was our footprint after we finished 2020, and our goal was 20 counties. We spread far, we spread fast through virtual and the in-person services that we were able to provide during early voting. So since 2014, we have registered over 55,000 voters. We have educated over 1 million voters. And these are conversations with voters. We've trained over 5,000 volunteers. We have over 600 community partnerships across the state that allow us in their facility or partner with us to register and educate voters. And we're really leading in the voter education and get out the vote innovation, not just in North Carolina. Other states are asking us for technical support and advice, and copying some of the tools like our What's on the Ballot tool to really get to the why vote, to help people explain what's on your ballot and how it impacts the issues that you care about, and what elected offices deal with those issues that you most care about. And those offices are going to be there every election. Candidates come and go, but you need to understand the power and the duties and responsibilities of these offices. So we're really leading in our education services as well. And we're doing Voting Rights Ambassadors 2022. The program, we're going to do 50 sites this year across the state on college campuses and in BIPOC communities. We're really fired up for early voting because of that same day registration. It is a great get out the vote opportunity as well. So we're going to celebrate each voter this year. Every voter coming out, we're going to ask them, let me see that sticker. Would you like another sticker? And we'll be able to identify folks who didn't get to vote through this conversation, and then we can help them make their vote count and cast a ballot. And if they did vote successfully, then they can be a voting MVP, which means they're going to text 3 friends, family members, voting information to get down, vote early. Here's the new eligibility, and here's what you need to bring for same day registration. So this is a relational organizing tactic if you're into election speak, and it's a proven way to increase turnout by having trusted messengers share trustworthy election information. So really excited for early voting this year. And I always have to give a shout out. I feel like we have the best team in voting, and we embrace our orange and our brand, and we look pretty cool while we're doing it. All right, I have been talking for a long time, and I want to make sure I have covered everything that you would like me to cover, and that we have plenty of time for question and answers, because I talk fast and I just went through a portion of our work.
Fantastic. I have to say, Kate, I'm so blown away and impressed with what you have done and what your organization's done. You are rocking the orange. It is just so noticeable. It just pops out. I love it. I'm a color girl. Anyway, so I just think that it's really exciting to hear about what you're doing. You define grassroots work. This is on the ground. And you told us when we were talking earlier about how you were not, if you don't mind me saying, you weren't a serious student in your youth, but you just were inspired by this movement and what you were doing. And you are phenomenal. You are brilliant. You are out there just really affecting people's lives. And when you give us these statistics, it gives me goosebumps. You're really doing a great job. So
well, I have to say I'm a non-traditional student. I got married very young, and I went to school part-time while I worked full-time, and had 1.5 children by the time I graduated at age 26. And I didn't have to take out any student loans because General Mills paid for my education. I was just really passionate about politics once I started working for the Wellstone campaign, and through my political science teachers. I went to a social justice school for folks who were working and going to school. So my professors really encouraged me with my passion to go in and look for something in the voting or political world.
Thank you. That's really inspiring. There were so many interesting things that you touched on, and there's lots of questions in the chat. I wanted you to speak a little bit about, you said that there have been a lot of changes since the Voting Rights Act changed, and that you're seeing tremendous changes on the ground. Can you give us a little more information about what you're seeing, what the changes are?
Well, since the Voting Rights Act was cut, the legislature can, make changes with no oversight. The only protection we have is the veto of the governor. And we have a governor who will veto voter suppression rules, which is good. Not unless there's a veto override, enough votes to override the governor's veto, which there is not a super majority anymore in the North Carolina state legislature. So there is not like this possibility of these veto overrides every time he vetoes something. So we have been saved by the veto several times with voting rights legislation. And The hardest thing is the on again and off again requirements for voting. So photo ID for one. Photo ID was in the 2014 or 2013 law that got struck down in 2016, midway through the cycle. So we had a primary where there was photo ID in 2016 and a general when it wasn't required. And if you're an average voter, you're not paying attention to the news stories about it's on again, it's off again. All, they're asking for IDs. I don't have mine. I forgot mine. I had people even deny trying to get registered with us. Like, I don't have my ID on me. I can't do it. No, we have to overcome those objections because they may have heard something and didn't get the actual correct fact-based information. So it's been whiplash with voter ID laws because in 2018, those constitutional amendments on the ballot, one of them was that voters were required to show photo ID. Sounds great for average voter. However, they didn't even write what IDs were going to be accepted or not. They were going to come back in session after the election and make up those rules. So of course it passed in 2018. They came back into session. They did not include student IDs, and then they started making exceptions with the student ID so it would get through. Thankfully, the courts and the litigation has held that back right now. Photo ID is still being litigated in court, but as of now, there is no photo ID required to vote in North Carolina. Not every voter knows that, so that's why our materials and our conversations are just so important when we're out there educating folks about what the real requirements are this year, because the misconceptions are so vast. More misconceptions around felony convictions. Folks think that once they have a felony criminal record, they can never vote again. That's not true. It hasn't been the case like in North Carolina. Folks with previous criminal records, as long as you're done with probation and parole, were able to vote. So we, in the past 8 years, have registered thousands and thousands of voters who were finished with their sentence, finished serving their probation and parole, but didn't know and hadn't voted in sometimes 10, 20, 30, or even 40 years because they thought they could not vote. And now we just had this ruling after July that as long as you're outside of jail or prison and you're a US citizen, you absolutely can vote. It's another thing to go and talk to folks and educate them on this. And at the same time, you have to be very careful because that is also being litigated. So in December, we could take that away. So between all of these different technical changes to absentee ballots to make it harder, not letting us turn in people's absentee ballot request forms. So when I'm in the jail yesterday, we have to fill out registration form, absentee ballot request form. I have to have the voter put it in an envelope, give them a stamp. We put a sticker for the Board of Elections on it, and I have to have it going in the outgoing mail in the jail because I cannot turn that in for the voters, even though I'm going to go to the Board of Elections and turn in the voter registration forms. So these are the kind of technical complications that folks don't necessarily think are a big deal, but they are a really big deal for the folks who are most impacted by voter suppression. And those are the kind of barriers we're trying to break down through our education and outreach, and hopefully will lead to some policy just to lift all boats and make voting more accessible to everyone.
Yes, and did everybody hear her say she's been in the prisons for the last few days working on this herself? So this is one of the major things that you do, which I just applaud you for boots on the ground, going and doing the work. I did notice that Anne, who is from North Carolina, one of our members, said the fridge card has incredible impact for those of us in North Carolina. What's the fridge card?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to pull one up. Do you have a fridge card in the chat, Amy? Okay.
Okay, while you pull that up,
Okay.
I'll ask you another question. Cynthia Baker asks, amazing work. Can you speak to the midterms outlook for North Carolina?
Yeah, the midterm, our 2018 turnout was 53%. And you can vote, registered voters turned out at 63% in 2018. So we're really proud because those are mostly young people, mostly people of color living in low income areas. So we're really proud of beating the state turnout. I think that North Carolina will improve to above 60% turnout this year. We had 75 in the presidential, which is huge. Not every one of those voters is going to carry over to the midterm. But I do think we're going to, North Carolina turnout will be well above the 2018 turnout. Folks are interested in getting registered, and students are interested and they're getting registered. So there is a noticeable uptick in interest and eagerness to make sure that they're registered and they have the right information starting about August. There's still a lot of folks that don't have any clue that we're voting this year, and we will catch them and bring them to early voting. But we're doing really well. We have done 243 classroom presentations this year in high school and college campuses in front of the classroom, educating students and registering them. We have registered 10,000 voters this year so far, and we still have a couple weeks to go in the registration deadline and then the same day registration. So yeah, voting is it's a thing. People are interested in it, and I think we're going to have great turnout this year. Okay, so the fridge card. Can I talk about the fridge card now?
Oh yeah, please.
All right, so I am going to share my screen again so I can walk you all through our methodology with the fridge card. So the fridge card I introduced at that first ever training because as a volunteer myself, I was sick of not having localized early voting information and dates and rules to hand out to voters. I think that's really important. And campaigns and the organizations I was volunteering for never had anything as useful as I needed it to be. So we're trying to cram all of the information that a volunteer needs to tell a voter, and as like a cheat sheet for the volunteers. Like if you do anything, if you read this card to the voter, you've done a good job. And as a guide for anything the voter could need, like put it on your fridge. Don't forget to vote. You have a resource at your fingertips. So we're describing what offices we're voting this year, the early voting window, that where you can register and vote the same day, the general election date, and the registration deadline for the general election date is October 14th. And then we have a link. Everybody says, well, who's running? We've got our What's on the Ballot link. Go to What's on the Ballot. You can do the League of Women Voters ballot lookup. We also explain what the offices do. And then here on the back, make sure you're registered. If you're a new voter, have you moved? Have you been removed from the voting rolls? Let's take a look. So this is the voter lookup. You can look up your registration and you can get registered online at the same time. We have a service through civic where folks can, if they do not have a DMV issued ID to get registered with the state DMV, that's the only online registration we have here, they will get mailed their mostly completed voter registration form that all they need to do is sign and date, and it's got a pre-addressed and pre-stamped envelope for their Board of Elections to get that voter registration in the mail. And then we, of course, we always talk about eligibility. Most confusion is around eligibility. If you're a citizen, 18 by election day, not currently in jail or prison for a felony, you can vote. And if you've lived in at least North Carolina for 30 days as of election day. So we're October 8th, we're approaching that deadline for folks moving. And then 16 and 17-year-olds can re-register or pre-register. And another huge education piece we need to talk about every year is the 3 ways to vote. Early at any early voting site, same day registration, fail-safe voting, election day, only where you're registered, you have to be registered, or by mail. And you have to do that in advance by requesting your ballot. And then we talk about moving. Every time you move, you need to update your registration. And we have the voter hotline on the bottom. So if anyone has any questions, there's a voter hotline that is manned in North Carolina. And we have an inverted color scheme for our Spanish card as well. We find it's really important to make sure we have English and Spanish materials available.
I think those are fantastic. I kind of wish it said fridge card on top because it's so homey and it tells you to stick it on your fridge. I think, you might want to stick the fridge card on there because it's such a great concept. And yeah, I love seeing that. Thank you. Another thing that I saw on the fridge card, and which I heard you mention, which is they let high school age kids register in North Carolina in advance of the actual age of voting. And that's really unusual, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Pre-registration is wonderful, and it was one of the elements of that massive voter suppression bill that got reinstated after the Supreme Court knocked it down. So 16 and 17-year-olds, if they're not going to be ready for the upcoming election, if they won't be 18 by election day, it's basically just filling out the same form and just checking that you won't be 18, but you are at least 16. And they put it in a file. The Board of Elections processes it. It processes the form, kind of puts it in an imaginary drawer. And as soon as that voter is eligible and there's an election coming up in which they are eligible, they send them their voter registration card. So working across high schools and in classrooms for sophomores, juniors, and seniors is one of our huge focuses, especially in the springtime when they're getting ready to graduate. We want to make sure we catch all of the students that are about to graduate, make sure they know what their next election is, and just make sure everybody's pre-registered and registered and knows that we vote every year. When you move, you got to re-register, and that there are a lot of important local offices on the ballot, and where to find resources.
That's incredibly effective when you have a group that's sort of a captured. Last time you have them all together and can teach them civics, to be able to register them at that time is really wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's see. Kitty says, you mentioned that there was voter intimidation in the 2020 election. This seems to be a growing trend. How do you train your volunteers to identify and counter voter intimidation?
Yeah, voter intimidation comes in a lot of different forms. From a poll worker not being cooperative inside and not knowing the rules, to trucks driving by with Confederate flags out the back of their car, to folks just standing across the parking lot from our poll watchers shouting at them. And one of them happens to be the wife of the sheriff. Sheriffs are on the ballot this year, so it's a very tense situation. But thankfully, the Board of Elections is pretty good in most areas and is pretty organized. And we have a great voter hotline. And so we'll call and we'll report things, and the chief judge will go to the chief judge and we'll tell them what's going on if there's something going on in the parking lot. And then we can report any instance of a voter not being able to vote, especially if it's a reason that we know that they should go right back inside and do it. We will tell them to go back and do it, but we'll still report it. So there's a big network of statewide advocacy and tracking organizations and lawyers that are in North Carolina. We're so grateful for them. But our volunteers, at the polls, we say, you want to keep the peace and protect the voters, and just report anything that is not okay, because voter intimidation is a felony. It's a crime. I have signage that we put outside of our tents that say that voter intimidation is a felony. So we're going to call and we're going to report you if you are intimidating voters.
Wow. You take it the whole range. That's really, thank you for your service. And what do you find, with the whole thing that happened in Kansas, this very conservative state suddenly had an outpouring of women showing up to vote who hadn't previously voted. Are you seeing a difference in gender in the registration of your voters in North Carolina at this point?
We always, in every single year, we register more females than males. It's just the way it is. So I do think this upcoming generation of young women really want to vote, and they really want to be informed. I can't say that it's more than any other year. I mean, we had a huge influx of women voters in 2017, for example, with the Women's March. So I just think women are taking control of their civic engagement, and we're trying to make sure that they, stay up to date on all the rules but yeah, we'll see what the turnout is, but I think that women are very engaged. I think the hardest people to pull into the process right now are folks who have just been, really, really struggling to see how voting would change their circumstances. So people who are involved in the criminal justice system, or who are very low income, they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. So we have to make the case that voting, we want you to use your voice to better the outcomes for yourself and your community and be part of the conversation.
Mary asks, do you have any research about why people don't vote? Is it mostly a problem with the system of voting, or is it more of a feeling of being disconnected?
So with young people, it's mechanics. They wait till it's too late. They don't go to the right side on election day and it's too late. They have every intention of voting, but they're new to it and the barriers can, be a little overwhelming. That's why we focus so much on high school and college work, because we need students to know that it's not like a DMV trip. You do not need to bring all that paperwork like you're going to the DMV, because they just don't know. So if you haven't voted before, or been with a parent or someone to vote and know that it's a pretty straightforward, easy process, you might just say, oh, it's just too hard. I have teenagers, a 20-year-old, I have to walk them through their plan to vote every single time. So young people, we want them to vote 4 times by the time they turn 24, because then they will have it down. They will have a voting down. You vote 3 times in a row, you're a voter for life. And so we want folks to do that as soon as they become eligible, making those local, those midterm, and those presidential elections. Other reasons why people don't vote is they just don't have the information and they don't see that it applies to them, especially with local elections. Unless you go and talk to someone face to face, how do you even get your news on local elections? Is there any in-depth reporting in your area about what the candidates are actually going to do for your community? It is really hard when candidates aren't grassroots, because then they're knocking doors last minute, putting yard signs up, but win or lose, they never come back to that community. And voters notice this. So building trust with voters is really, really important, to earn their enthusiasm for voting, but also just getting voters in the habit of voting. A lot of people don't vote because they love voting. They do it just because it's what they do.
Right. And once someone's a voter, they're usually a voter for life. So it's,
yeah.
It's on and on. You may have already addressed this. Can you tell us some of the voting hurdles the state legislature have passed? Is there anything you can add to that? That's a toughie.
There's a long list. I mean, gerrymandering is one of the biggest hurdles that we face in North Carolina. They split precincts on campuses, on HBCU campuses down the middle, diluting the power of Black and brown communities and young communities, and diluting these communities by literally tearing them up into 4 districts for political gain. And that, after 10 years of gerrymandering, that's why people are feeling a certain way, that no matter what I do, they're not going to listen. It's like, well, yeah, you're kind of right. At the state legislature, they don't, because they are in safe legislative districts. So that's why it's even more important that we have everyone vote. So then when they do the census and the redistricting, that we can have a better shot at getting fair representation.
Okay, and then finally, maybe you can tell us about your partner organizations, if there's any groups that you want to give a shout out to, or that you have had success working with.
Oh, there's so many. So we have 600 partner organizations, and but partnership comes in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. So we have our legal partners like Forward Justice and the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, and they're litigating everything. And Forward Justice actually won a case that allows folks on probation and parole to have their voices heard this year. And so we're doing this Unlock Your Vote tour with them, and partnering on reaching out to these folks and making sure they know their voting rights this year. Same with Southern Coalition. They're fighting the photo ID law before the courts, and they're going to be, and we've got the Moore versus Harper case coming up too with the Supreme Court in December. So our legal partners are everything, and And we in turn can help them by providing on the ground, like, how is this new legislation, how is this new policy directly impacting the voters in North Carolina? Because we're out talking to voters every single day. We know where the rubber meets the road. Some of our other partners are like NC Asian Americans Together, Democracy NC. We've got campus partnerships. We're on 48 college campuses, and we're partnering with All In Democracy Challenge, which is the national organization, and then NC Campus Engagement to facilitate the North Carolina Campus Challenge. And so there's 31 campuses opted into for rivalry of who can get the most improvement in turnout, most improvement in voter registration. Those awards will be awarded next year, but they all have to have an action plan for civic engagement, registration, and turnout. And so we provide the boots on the ground for those college campuses to register voters, but also just be educated and informed of like what the current rules are. It's really hard to keep up with. And then we partner with things like food banks, congregations, you name it, jails, county jails, the sheriff is our partner. They are an elected official. It is awkward, but we need their support to allow us into the facility to service voters. And that is a lot of time and trust building. And then school districts like Guilford County Schools, we did every single 30 high schools, this voter education, and they are committed to working with us every cycle to make sure their students are registered, and we provide the content for that curriculum. And so and then the Carolina Panthers, Charlotte Hornets, we've already got sports teams that are championing us and allowing us to come to their games and spreading voting messaging using our information for North Carolina voters.
Well, Kate, BigTent is very proud to be working with you today and to be part of that same movement. And the notes that are coming in through the chat are just couldn't be more grateful and admiring. And anyway, we're thrilled to have you here today. And thank you for all that you're doing in North Carolina. It's really impressive. I hope that many others will follow your lead because you're fantastic. So thank you very much. And at this point, it's sort of wrapping up the time. If there's anything else you want to say, but I just want to thank you for all of us. This has really been one of my favorites, I have to say, spectacular. And we all are with you. So
thank you. Well, I appreciate that. Amy's putting so many opportunities in the chat, and we always love and appreciate support from other states. I think that states and state groups and local grassroots groups working together are the most effective, because when you go up to like a national level, you're not specific enough to what the state and the local people actually need, and knowing where that rubber meets the road. And so we're hoping in 2013 to be able to pick a few more states to like get nitty gritty in and provide a what's on the ballot tool, fridge card, and just start, because we are getting asked, and we're so close to South Carolina, and the Panthers want us to have South Carolina information as well. But we also have done technical assistance for our volunteers in Washington State to create their Washington what's on the ballot. So we have a lot of great innovation happening here, and I would if you need support, 2023 will be the year that we are going to go out and find some groups to partner with and start expanding.
Great. Okay, well, thank you, Kate. And I'll just conclude by saying we have a speaker tomorrow night that I hope everyone will join us for. It's our spotlight speaker, and it's David Pepper, who's the former head of the DNC, who's going to be speaking to us at 7 p.m. And so you can go on our website and register for this event. And I thank you all for being here. And I thank you all for writing your letters and telling your friends to vote and being a part of the movement for voters and strengthening our democracy together. So thanks again. You can vote. Kate Fellman, you're a hero.
Oh,
all right.
The best team in voting. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thanks.